Hey guys, it's Rachel. It's Thankful Thursday. This week we're on the third week of the behavioural model for change to work through the process of recovery. The first week was pre-contemplation, which is mainly concerning the beginning of illness and kind of not having a completely clear understanding of it, and other people being worried about you. Week 2 last week was contemplation, which is when you kind of start to realise your behaviours and the impact that it's having on yourself and those around you, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, and that you're trying to figure out treatment or whether you want to engage in treatment, and just kind of really weighing up where you're at with it. Today, week 3, we're going to look at, so it's been pre-contemplation, contemplation, and today's active change, which is basically doing something about it. So having kind of thought about changing or wanting to change, how would you cope without your eating disorder? This is moving on to the actual active part of it, where you do something about it. It's the beginning of recovery treatment options, considering what is out there, what could help, what couldn't help, what you feel your needs are, even being assessed and having some advice on what your needs are and what your treatment could be. It's basically letting people in. It's a stage of being honest with people. I don't like the word confession, but it is that type of thing. It's the point of saying, look, this is what's been going on for me, I want to move forward, or this is what's been going on for me and I'm scared and I don't want to be like this anymore, which then hopefully means asking for help. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're asking for help from professionals. It could be your best friend, it could be a teacher, it could be your mum, your dad, your older sister, your older brother, your younger brother, cousin. It doesn't really matter who it is, but it's basically somebody who you feel you could maybe talk to. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be able to be completely honest with that person or people. But it's making that step towards kind of letting people know where you're at. And then, like I've said, because it's the active stage of recovery, it is about making steps forward. So that's kind of in summary what week 3 is going to be about. What I'm going to do now is I'm kind of going to link it back to last week and bring it into now and kind of discuss some of those options that are there. I think the easiest way possibly is to connect it to some of my own experiences. It doesn't mean that everybody's is going to be the same. But for me, after being incredibly ill and I had been in treatment and I had tried to change, I still had very little, if any, insight into what was going on, because although I was going to therapy, at that point I was so actively using behaviours that it was more about kind of keeping me alive and keeping my risk or getting my risk levels down. So it wasn't recovery in the sense of having everything taken away from me, which is what happened when I was put in hospital. So when I got to that point of going into hospital, and it doesn't have to be that for other people, but more often than not for people, there comes a time when there's a break or a crash, and for a lot of people that does happen. And it's kind of like, because there's only so long, not just physically but emotionally, when you're poorly, there's going to be a burnout point, and it's usually that point that people get help, because the people around you notice it, and even yourself, you burn out, it becomes too much. By that point for me, I had decided I wanted to change. I didn't particularly go willingly into hospital. It was very, very difficult, but I did stay there. And it was my first kind of thing that I did is well, I got my mum to do it because of where I was at, but to let people know what was going on. And also I became very honest with my family about the behaviours I've been engaging in and where I was at with the illness. And of course, there's no point in being in treatment if you can't be honest with the people treating you. And so that was kind of a goal I gave myself. It was kind of like, right, if you can't do anything else to help yourself right now, be honest with those around you about how much you're struggling. That helps with a lot of the issues concerning self-worth and denial and refusing to listen to others. If the one thing you can ask yourself to do is to just be honest, you're actually already giving yourself a huge leap forward. And it may not feel that way because behaviours don't necessarily change because of honesty, but if you're being able to be honest, that in itself is a huge step, because so often within eating disorders, and of course it happens across the board with other mental health problems, is that it's very, very easy to lie. I'm sure we've all been there. I've been there. You know, the deceit, the manipulation, the lies, the covering my tracks, claiming I've eaten when I haven't eaten, what have you, whatever behaviours we're using. For me, it was a point of being able to say, this is where I'm at. And it doesn't mean that through the process of my recovery I've always told my parents everything, or always told my friends everything, but I have been honest in treatment, and that was something, because I think that what's quite hard with family, friends and people who care and love you is it's difficult to be honest with them sometimes because you don't want to hurt them. But having been on the receiving end of somebody who hasn't been honest with me, I'd far rather know. So it doesn't mean you need to divulge all your deepest secrets, but there needs to be some form of integration and engagement with those around you, not just your treatment team. And I don't like to say it keeps you accountable, but in some ways, if you've got somebody who cares for you and who is saying, you know, how's this going, how's that going, by not lying to them, you're having to face your own issues as well. So if, say, have you had breakfast, and you haven't, and you say, well, no, actually I haven't, you're actually opening up the lines of engagement to be able to say, well, how about you try this, or how about you do that? And even if you can't manage that, you've been able to be honest, and you've been able to let somebody know that you're struggling. Whereas I think when you're in the grasp of an eating disorder, that is very, very difficult to do, and so it's easy to just say yeah and move on, you know. But by you being honest, not only are you helping the people around you to understand where you're at, you're actually saying it back to yourself. You're kind of saying, no, I've not had breakfast, and that triggers some sort of response in you. Whereas if you say, no, yeah, have whatever, there's not that chance for your brain to kind of just think, maybe I should do that. And I think that that's where subtle changes occur in recovery. Treatment options is a really difficult one. Obviously I'm from the UK. The services where I live are incredibly limited with regards to helping treat eating disorders. Unfortunately, we take people at our local EDU from all over the country, and it isn't particularly big, and so services are lacking. But what I think is important is that stage of seeking what is available. Yeah, so I think I touched on that last week concerning recovery options, and it becomes very, very difficult because services are so limited, and it then makes you question whether you deserve them. But what I do want to say is that for me, and certainly for other people I know who've recovered, quite often those early steps come from different sources really than just treatment. And it's about rallying people around you and allowing those people in to support you, because if you have to wait for services, or services aren't responding how they should be, you basically have to make the best of what you have got around you. And that differs for all of us, and I'm not here to say what is right for one person is right for another. For me, it happened to be my family. I was in my home environment, and my mum offered me huge amounts of support, which at times made very difficult, but you know, I'd have been stupid to have rejected it. So who you ask for help, where you ask for help, is all going to be unique to where you're at. But I would advise you to gain advice from kind of quite a wide variety. Even if you write to us here, pick up the phone to eating disorder charities, and just kind of get some understanding of what could be available, where could be available. If you don't feel ready to access fully treatment, how about maybe going to a self-help group, or just doing some reading on kind of where you're at and little changes you can make watching these videos, that type of thing. Recovery is active, and that sounds like the most obvious sentence that I could use, but recovery doesn't just happen. You don't just wake up one day and everything's better. It takes fucking hard work, and persistent hard work, and determination. And like any addiction, any illness, any struggle, you need to know that it's there. You need insight into how you can start to change. The most obvious change to begin with is the behavioural level. So my advice would be that if you were to seek support, that it's on a very behavioural level, and that doesn't mean that you don't get emotional support at the same time, but you challenge the behaviours, because in my opinion, and not everybody believes this, that if you start to deal with what caused you to get ill while you're still using behaviours, that could in fact worsen the use of behaviours. So my model for recovery is kind of to spend some time dealing with the behaviours to stabilise the weight maintenance, make weight gain, stabilise the food, other behaviours. It doesn't mean that you have to be fully recovered. It just means that there's a bit of stability there with how you're doing. And then it's about, if the emotions are coming out because of that, accessing those emotions, understanding where those emotions are coming from, and finding healthier and new ways to cope. You're not going to find healthier and new ways to cope if you're still using old behaviours. And I make it sound so easy to just let go of old behaviours, but until you try and cope without those behaviours and have to find another thing to do instead of that, that's the only way you're going to learn, until you get to a point of kind of maintenance, relapse prevention, where you have things in place. Now, something I did for my girlfriend was I wrote down a load of things that I know that she benefits from when I'm there if she's struggling. And okay, it's a lot more difficult for her to do it without me being there, but if I write it down, I'd say to her, right, keep this out when you struggle, try and access some of those things. I kept a happy book during my early days of recovery, and I wrote in all the things that made me happy. Like if I'd had a really nice experience with my goddaughter, I put, being with my goddaughter, and so when I struggled, I could read over it, and I could, it lessened that kind of fight because I was reading it and I'd actually written it. It wasn't like a piece of printed paper that a therapist had given me saying, here's a list of distractions. I'd done it, and I think these are your steps in terms of making active changes. It's actively engaging yourself in a different way. Some people might not feel ready for talk therapy, so if you're tackling your behaviours and that's hard enough, maybe an art class, art therapy, dance class, it's about finding things that help you cope in healthier ways so that you need the eating disorder and those behaviours less and less. And so that's what this part of the model is about, and that part of the model is probably the longest part, because the illness point, the point of getting to do I need help, to then actually realising you want to change something, that's the beginning of your recovery, and that is a really, really long journey. And that is something that I did through 2004, 5, 6, relapsed in 2007, 8, 9, 10 have been well. And so that recovery, for the first few years was really, really hard, and it was about finding myself. And that's what active change is about, at least for me anyway, is about finding who you are, what makes you happy, what excites you, what are you passionate about, what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, what makes you smile, what makes you laugh, what's your favourite film, what programme can you always put on and know that you're going to laugh, who's the person you can always pick up the phone to and have a good gossip with. It's about finding those things and actually documenting them yourself, because they've come from you, so that when you do struggle you can pick those skills back up. I've rambled on, and I'm going to leave it now because I'm sure that this video is really long, so I just hope that that's helped, and I will look forward to seeing you guys next week. Okay, bye.